Hello, everybody. I'm Michael Monaco.
And I'm Bobby Salveson, and we are the Hazmat Guys, bringing you the knowledge and insight to make your job a little bit easier.
Before we get into the show, let's thank today's sponsors.
The Hazmat Guys would like to thank our sponsor, Rigaku Analytical Devices. Rigaku Analytical Devices reduce fluorescence interference when identifying unknown chemicals using the 1064 advantage of the Progeny Rescue. Visit rigakuanalytical.com to learn more.
HazSim training systems have been in use across North America since 2011. Hazmat teams, firefighters, confined space specialists, and industrial safety trainers alike have found the value in the HazSim Pro system. HazSim brings real information-based decision-making to students from instructors safely and realistically. No more burning up sensors or pretending a 3x5 card is a meter in training. Visit hazsim.com for realistic training solutions.
All right, we are back with yet another enthralling episode of the Hazmat Guys podcast. I'm here with Mike.
Hello.
And our new friend, Brian.
Hello.
Who the hell's Brian?
I don't know. We say that every single episode. Every time we do an episode, we're like, who is this?
Who is this guy?
But Brian, tell us what you do.
Right now I'm a consultant. I do training for law enforcement and hazmat in regards to the OSHA regulations for going into clandestine laboratories. I do a lot of narcotic training, and expert witness testimony is pertaining to narcotic cases.
Are you like a chemist, or are you...
Yes, by trade I'm a forensic chemist. I got degrees in biology and chemistry.
Oh, you're a nerd.
I fell towards the chemistry side, and so I ran with that, and I really got into the narcotic aspect. And then once I started getting into the clandestine laboratories, that expanded into some of the WMD stuff and, explosives and toxins. And
So it was kind of like an addiction. You just kind of kept going.
That was a bad pun.
Yeah. I couldn't get enough of it. Yeah.
That's so you work with what, the sheriff, the DEA? What do you...
Basically, we're a private company. We put together the DEA original Clan Lab program for agents back in 1987 as a company. And we still teach that program for DEA. And so since then, we've expanded into the National Guard counter-drug, and we teach for all the other local law enforcement agencies. And then we do any advanced training for PCP labs, ecstasy labs, or specialty types of situations. What to go in for, what to sample, what to look for with your air monitoring equipment, what to pick up, what's going to trigger on a PID. And so deciphering all that information that you're getting from your instruments out in the field as you go through these labs and trying to parlay that into how bad this environment is what we do the training on. And then because of my background, I've synthesized ecstasy, PCP, methamphetamine. I've even made methamphetamine from NutraSweet. Of all things.
It's like a MacGyver move.
It's like a diet meth.
Yeah, well,
it's like
I spent 19...
keto friendly.
I spent 19 years in the lab, and I was primarily assigned to doing crime scenes and drug labs and analyzing narcotic evidence. And so I went a little bit further and started doing research into how these guys are making the drugs and then the byproduct formation so we could testify better as an expert and then identify the hazards for people going into these scenes and what the hell they're running up against. So that was a big part of it. And so that was publishing papers. And then NES, the company that I teach for now, got a hold of me and wanted me to start doing teaching for them back in 2002. So I started teaching for DEA and some of these other local law enforcement agencies back in 2002. And I finally left the county of Sacramento and I went over full-time about 3 years ago.
Never look back.
Never look back.
Good for you.
Yeah. I'm traveling around the country now, teaching, giving testimony, going to conferences, and loving life.
All right.
Okay.
Then what, let's just roll right into this, because right now this is like the hot topic. Everybody is losing their minds. This reminds me of Ebola. This reminds me of H1N1. This reminds me of bird, swine. What the hell is the other one? Everything.
So, Mr. Heisenberg, what exactly is fentanyl?
Well, fentanyl is one of the more potent opioid drugs we have out there. There's obviously some more potent ones that have been developed, but as far as what we've seen medicinally hit the streets, medicinally speaking, fentanyl is one of the more potent opioid drugs we have. And we've got a lot of drugs that have been developed off that fentanyl backbone that are more potent than fentanyl, but because of their potency levels, they never made it towards any type of human development because the levels of potency is just too far, they're too great.
Right, because we're hearing a lot about that, like, people are just they're putting some type of, we'll leave it as a group on a fentanyl, and then they're getting pentafentanyl, afentanyl, carfentanyl, and it goes on and on and on. And these things are exponentially more potent, right?
Correct. If you look at the fentanyl backbone structure, as you start adding functional groups, each time you add one, you create a new compound. And just a matter of how potent is that drug, what's its tolerance dependence going to be as it hits the mu receptors in the body, and how's your body going to react to this drug. And so each time you add a new compound, well, if you look at the fentanyl backbone structure, there's 1,400 different compounds that can be made from just fentanyl and using that as a backbone structure. And to date, we've only had a little over 200 that have ever been in existence. So as far as
we got a long way to go.
they have a long ways to go as far as new compounds that can come out of this.
Business ideas.
Yeah, all right, we have to
Just
mark this
thinking
down.
about
We're
it.
writing
Yeah.
feverishly, yeah. This is great.
Well, the one rule of thumb, though, that we have, though, is we've kind of identified the fact that as they modify the fentanyl molecule and come up with new compounds, each of those compounds is typically more potent than fentanyl itself. And so we've given a lot of threat and scares into fentanyl, but the new compounds that the Chinese continue to hit us with often are more potent than fentanyl itself. But reality of it is we don't know how much more potent because there's never been human testing. These were always research chemicals, never tested on humans until now.
So it was kind of like Al-Qaeda, and then ISIS came along.
Right.
Right.
Right. It just kind of emerged out of nowhere and then
Right.
hit us.
And they're like, wow, these are Boy Scouts compared to ISIS.
Well, what are they really using it? I mean, like, I know it's a recreational, and we're hearing about Grey Death and mixing with heroin and ecstasy, etc. As far as the mind can go, what are they? They're using this to get high, right?
They're using it for a euphoric effect. And
Okay.
so in the right high enough dose, if you bind to let me kind of explain what's going on in the body. Along the central nervous system, you have receptors. And when you bind to these opioid receptors, those opioid receptors affect pain transmission, so if you've had an injury, but they also affect heart rate, breathing rates, respiratory rates. And so by binding to those receptors and stopping the transmission of that signal, you can get a euphoric effect, but you also compromise medically the body. And so you're talking about a very fine gray area, especially with the potency of some of these drugs. That's a real narrow gray area. And when you start talking about things like fentanyl, 2 milligrams is your typical lethal dose. And that's not really a whole heck of a lot of drug. And so if you got a dose that had 4 milligrams, more than likely your toe's up. And unless someone's got Narcan and naloxone.
And a lot of it.
And a lot. And it depends on your dose and which fentanyl analog, something like a carfentanyl is going to take multiple administrations of naloxone. And whether the person that has a naloxone has that many doses to bring you back or at least make you stable is questionable. And so there's some hazards with that.
And even it's used medically, right? I mean, basically that was the genesis of it.
Well, the genesis behind fentanyl was for cancer patients, people that are terminally ill, or people that have breakthrough pain. If you're on your oxycodone, but the pain's so bad at that one point in time that you need something a little bit stronger. They can give you a fentanyl, then once you are able to adjust, back you off and put you back on your oxy or hydrocodone, whatever opioid drug you're on. But
it's so bad when they say there's other drugs that are heavy oxy.
Yeah.
It's like this is the breakdown drug.
Yeah. And then it's always been on the back end of a cocktail too, as anesthetic. As you went under, if you came out of the anesthetic, at least you had a pain management drug in place, a strong one. So for whatever medical procedure you had, you weren't in a lot of pain when you woke up.
Wow.
And so, but the problem is it's been modified, and again, the Chinese. In the United States, we've kind of limited our testing and what we've produced on analogs of fentanyl, but the Chinese really haven't held back on what they've produced and released. And the big threat I think we have right now that goes beyond the fentanyl is like with the carfentanyl. We've had the carfentanyl. It's actually a banned chemical weapons agent. And right now, the only thing we're seeing it being moved in is the narcotic people being cut up with ketamine and some of the other heroin and some of these other drugs. But we've got a lot of people, including ISIS, who we talked about earlier, are just hell-bent on getting a high body count. And so they'll go into a crowded theater and open up rounds and or set off an explosive or drive a truck into a crowded area. Well, when you start firing rounds, people scamper. And you try and get as many as you can before they all get away. But this would be a silent killer.
Right.
If you got one of these guys that got a hold of this material out of China on the dark web, they could release a cloud of this stuff into the Orange Bowl or go to some high populated event, go to the top tier and unleash a kilo of it. And you're going to quietly kill hundreds. And the people that respond to treat those people, they're not going to have enough naloxone, so people are going to die.
Right.
And then what do you do with that area? How long do you have to cordon off that area? How big did that cloud go? And I mean, just the mayhem that would cause. Chinese are selling that for less than $3,000 for a kilo of carfentanyl. So for less than $3,000, you could go buy a banned chemical weapons agent and on the dark web. And again, it's just a matter of one day, one of these knuckleheads putting that, two and two together and releasing something like that. And it's going to put a huge impact on civil support teams, hazmat teams, or your law enforcement clan lab personnel. It's going to tax all of them. And there's not going to be enough naloxone in that area. People are going to die. And like I said, it's just going to cause a massive, massive event. And, it's just a matter of someone doing that and getting it airborne. I've synthesized fentanyl 4 different times, and carfentanyl probably is not much different, but it's a very light, fluffy powder. Right. And it's kind of like baking soda. You get a good wind current, and that stuff's going to go airborne. And it's going to dust you. And not only is it an inhalation hazard, but it's also a transdermal drug, and it's going to be a skin contact hazard too, and you're going to take a dose.
Now, we've looked at the dermal conductivity, if you would, of the fentanyl, and it's really not that big of a hazard, right? The fentanyl itself. How does the carfentanyl relate to the fentanyl itself when it comes to those transdermal,
We've done a lot of work because we've put together transdermal patches and transdermal applications for fentanyl. Right. And so there's been a lot of work if you're doing that type of testing, and you use cadaver skin. But we just never have done that testing with carfentanyl. Matter of fact, we estimate that the lethal dose of carfentanyl is 19 micrograms. That's our estimate, though. And that's because with fentanyl being, the lethal limit of fentanyl being 2 milligrams, carfentanyl being 100 times more potent than fentanyl, it's estimated that carfentanyl is roughly in maybe 20 micrograms then as far as a lethal dose. But we don't know because we've never done human testing with it. It's never been allowed for humans. The only thing that carfentanyl's been allowed for is used as a tranquilizer in taking down large game. Yeah. And even that, you have to mix the doses. A 10 milligram dose will take down a large African male elephant. If you give that same 10 milligram dose to a bear, you'll kill it. And so again, with carfentanyl, something like that, it's always been way too potent to be put out in the streets as a medicinal drug. And with the chemists that we've got in the garage is trying to blend and cut these powders up, narcotics up with coffee grinders and blenders, it's near impossible for these guys to do it. And that's why when carfentanyl or fentanyl hit the streets, people die. They just can't cut it up to an accurate level.
And so we're seeing it. Do you see it more in like the pill format? How are you seeing it on the street?
It depends on where it's coming from. In the United States, we have restrictions on obtaining tableting machines, but in Canada, you don't. And so the carfentanyl goes into Canada, obviously gets tableted out most of the time, and the local stuff often goes into capsules or little Ziploc bags. There are situations where people are bringing in tableting machines under false declarations, say as a printer or some other type of machinery. But you'd have to bring it under false declarations and smuggle it essentially into the country. So tablet machines locally are harder to get.
So that's how they take it in. Is carfentanyl's taken in tablet with what, a binder or some type of filler?
Yeah, typically when you mix up a narcotic like that, as long as it's just that one active ingredient, say carfentanyl, then you put in magnesium stearate. There's other components that you put in there. Some of them are to keep the machines lubed up so the powders flow through the wells, and when you stamp it, you don't want the stamp to stick to the tap and die. So there's powders that you put in there, lubricants in that case, for that reason, that will also dilute the drug. But if you're looking like at a carfentanyl, it's active in the body at 1 microgram, which is about the particle of baking soda. Yeah. And so your average oral dose of carfentanyl should be between 1 to 3 micrograms, and that's 1 to 3 particles of baking soda. And there's no way to cut it up to that level. And like I said, people die. It doesn't take too much over the body. Like I said, with that hitting that mu receptor, that's a very fine gray area, and we don't have a lot of room between recreational use and then overdose. And
it just seems like with that level of toxicity, that there should be more people. Like, I feel like a dealer cuts carfentanyl into something, like literally every person that comes in contact with that should theoretically be dead, because that's 1 grain. Like,
this knucklehead is not doing it on like lab grade equipment. He's doing it on a dollar store or scale.
Well, if they're gonna do it, and I don't want to tip the hat too much, but you'd almost have to do a liquid dilution. Yeah. Because you can't cut powders in solids like that. They're just impossible. But in the case of cutting the tablets, I think there's certain tablets that just don't have any in it, or not enough, maybe half of a particle, or some that have overdose. And like I said, you're just gonna have this variety. Some have underneath what you're looking for, and some have a little over. And if you get the one that's over, then you're
Right.
Sucks.
Now,
Sucks for you.
Yeah.
Why are they doing this? Like, heroin is a blast, but was it not fun enough? Like, what is the reason that they're cutting the fentanyls and the carfentanyls into heroin? Or are we seeing it move beyond heroin?
No, I think there's two reasons. I think there's two things going on here. One is the Chinese have been hitting us in towards for the last 10 years with synthetics. And they focused primarily on the stimulant and hallucinogenic drugs. And they ran amok. They gave us thousands of those new compounds. They hadn't tapped into the opioid addiction addict crowd yet. And so they're just now wandering into that. And they jumped in both feet with a fentanyl. They didn't start off with morphine or some little tamer. They went right in and jumped in with fentanyl. So I think that it's a brand new market for the Chinese now. The regulations that the Chinese put on their chemists over there in the labs and what everybody's looking for with the stimulant and hallucinogenic, trying to put some thresholds on how much they're kicking out over there. I think they just wandered into a new market. But the other one is profit. The Chinese will sell you a kilo of fentanyl for $8,000. To synthesize it, you're maybe $300-400 to synthesize it. They flip a pretty good profit margin. But for the guy that's, say, in the United States that purchased that 1 kilo for $8,000, 1 kilo of fentanyl, if you dilute that out into dosage units, say you want to make tablets, and you're shooting for a milligram, 2 milligrams will kill you, 1 milligram will give you a pretty good euphoric high. You shoot for 1 milligram, that'll give you 1 million tablets. Now, if you look at what our tablets sell for on the streets, our oxycodone sells for about $1 a milligram. So a 30 milligram tablet's about $30. So if I made 30 milligram counterfeit oxycodone tablets, I can make 1 million of them. My $8,000 investment just turned to a $30 million profit on the street. And all I had to do was order something on the dark web and smuggle it into this country.
Wow.
And so to smuggle a kilo of drug isn't that hard. And if you're talking about a $30 million profit, and if you lose a couple of opiate addicts in the way, then in these guys' mind, who cares? Look at the money you're making.
Yeah, you're making.
And so there's a huge profit margin.
Even if you lose 90% of your customer base,
still
who
doing
cares?
right.
You just walked away with $30 million.
Exactly. And so, you don't see that type of profit margin with any other drug right now. So there's a few things driving the market. This is a brand new market with all new synthetics that are coming out, derivatives of fentanyl, and we've got the U477s and these 00, and we got these other synthetics that have never existed before that are emerging now. It's a new market for these guys, and there's a high profit margin for these compounds.
Wow. Is there any indication that this is state-sponsored in any way, or is this really just kind of a manufacturer kind of just sitting in the dark web, sitting in the corner, making the stuff, shipping it out?
I think you've got a couple things going on. I think you've got some Chinese laboratories out there that are producing it and then shipping it out globally. And I think the Chinese are also shipping out the precursors and the reagents required to manufacture the fentanyl too. I know I've talked to some people from RCMP up in Canada, and they've tracked NPP, which is the precursor for fentanyl in this new Siegfried route for manufacturing it. They've tracked the NPP going into Canada, and there's really no other reasons to order and purchase NPP other than to manufacture fentanyl. Matter of fact, the Mexicans have been ordering bunches, large amounts of NPP, and from what I just understand, we just picked off 50 kilos of NPP in the New England area, and when you factor that out, again, because I synthesized it, often I get asked on the stand when I'm testifying, well, how much dope could you make from this precursor? So in this case, how much fentanyl could you make from 50 kilos of NPP? Well, the way the reactions run, it's not a 100% yield, but because you're building a bigger molecule, weight to weight wise, it ends up being about a 1-to-1. So the 50 kilos of NPP would end up making about 50 kilos of fentanyl, which would have been a huge laboratory. So the DEA got this and they picked it off, and which was good because that would have been a monster operation, a big problem for whoever had that laboratory.
Little chemistry question. I apologize if I'm getting too deep for somebody. What would that be on a mole to mole ratio?
Well, like I said, because what it is weight. I'm going weight to weight because it's like building a tinker. If I want to simplify, it's making a tinker toy project. So if I handed you a little tinker toy that's already made,
right,
and then I gave you 2 pieces and you put one on, and although you weren't able to get it on all of them because you're building a bigger Tinker Toy project, it weighs more.
Right, the weight
and
is...
so weight to weight wise. And so then I give you a second one, and although you're not able to add the second one to all the ones that you'd already built, well, it's weight to weight wise, it ends up equating out to a 1-to-1. So I kind of go by weight to weight rather than mole to mole.
Okay.
But it ends up being about a 1-to-1 equivalent for how much ever precursor you have. That's about the amount of fentanyl that you're going to get off the Siegfried method that's used for manufacturing it right now.
Attention Hazmat Nation, class is in session. FLIR, a global leader in CBRNE detection solutions, has recently announced a new educational resource named FLIR Primed. Primed is a free online tool that provides first responders with training videos, best practices, field checklists, and street truth. Throughout the initial 10-episode video series, Grant Coffey, a retired fire and rescue hazmat team coordinator and CBRNE expert of nearly 40 years, delivers industry insights and real-life experiences that keep first responders prepared. In addition, each episode concludes with a free field checklist or downloadable guide that responders can use immediately, like the Prime training poster that covers these key actions of prepare, recognize, input, monitor, experience, and decision. You can watch it now by visiting www.flir.com/primed.
The MP, what'd you call it?
NPP, Nancy.
NPP.
Yeah.
Is there any hazard associated with that? And are we seeing like labs actually creating the stuff here in the States? Is it something that we need to be worried about as we're making an entry, or for the most part, it's really just the end product that we're concerned about?
Well, we had to worry about it in 2005 what happened in 2005. We had a small fentanyl wave hit the country back then. Not like it's hitting now. We're got a monster wave now. Back then, we had what ended up being about 10 kilos hit the United States and wiped out over 1,000 people in a very short period of time, primarily in the Midwest and Northeast corner of the United States. And what happened with that fentanyl that was running around, there was a small byproduct we saw in there, and it was ANPP. We'd never seen that before, and we realized they found a new way to make fentanyl, and that put a big scare into the forensic community that we better figure out what the heck's going on here. So identified it as a Siegfried method, and so that's where this whole Siegfried thing came from. So when that happened, DEA quickly jumped on board, and they have the emergency scheduling authority to kind of start regulating compounds and things that could be used. They ended up putting NPP as a list 1 chemical, so you can't just go out and buy it anymore. The intermediate that you make en route to producing fentanyl, the ANPP, they made that a Schedule II narcotic to keep the Chinese from producing that and then shipping it over here, and then just a one-step reaction. But as soon as they regulated both NPP and ANPP, on the internet came out how to make your own NPP. And so if a chemist is going to be producing it here locally, it's going to probably be from a precursor called 4-piperidone. That's the precursor that's used to make NPP and then start this whole process.
Okay. So again, from a responder point of view, what is the dangers associated with walking into that kind of makeshift mock laboratory at home in the basement that somebody's doing the Siegfried method, or they're manufacturing starting from point A and moving all the way to fentanyl? The
danger we have with walking into those scenarios is we don't know where the cook's at with the process, how long he's been doing it, what's contaminated, what areas are hot. Whenever you've identified that you've got anything related to a fentanyl synthesis, that's level A. You got to back out and go level A. Now, you will on your air monitoring instruments be able to pick up some of the aniline and some of the other components, reagents that go into the synthesis, but that goes back to then your training, because again, your PID sensor on your air monitoring equipment is not going to tell you what chemical it is. It's going to tell you, hey, something's here. And it's up to you to figure out what it is that's triggering that instrument. And so, and part of that's what I do for my training is to train them. Here's the chemicals. Here's what's going to trip on your PID sensors, and here's what to look for, and here's where you're in harm's way.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's shift gears into what kind of meters and PP. So let's start with the meters. All right. So if we go into one of these, the scene, and there's a suspicion that we have something, the primary meters that we carry, the 4 gases, the PID and FID, really not going to pick up much on fentanyl, right?
You're not going to pick up on the drug itself. You're going to pick up on some of the reagents. Now, there's certain solvents that they specifically use in the process, and methylene chloride is one of them. Mm-hmm. And that you will pick up on a PID, but with the 11.7 lamp. And most law enforcement uses a 10.6. Some hazmat uses 11.7, and because it's expense and it goes out so fast. But you need 11.7 lamp to pick up some of the methylene chloride and some of the other components. But the aniline and some of the other reagents would be triggered on that PID, and be a matter of, again, walking around and finding out what's open, where they're at their process, and identifying it. The Raman and FTIR devices would then be used then to identify the product.
Okay.
In this case, and they should have it in their libraries. I don't know that they would have NPP or ANPP or some of these other intermediates that might, or byproducts that would form, but they should have the fentanyl in there. So if they've gotten as far as producing the fentanyl, that should trigger on the Raman and FTIR devices. And then again, if there's anything airborne, that's going to be picked up. Most of the components will be picked up on a PID, especially with 11.7 lamp, because they use a lot of methylene chloride, and it's specific because it's not like the other drug labs where they could switch out Coleman fuel. You can't do that in this case because to isolate the fentanyl, when you manufacture fentanyl, there's always byproducts. Whenever you manufacture something, there's always byproducts. And so to clean up your fentanyl, to isolate it, you've got to do a solvent extraction. And fentanyl is very soluble in methylene chloride, and some of these byproducts are not. So there's a specific methylene chloride extraction. And so we don't see a lot of variance when it comes to the solvents when they synthesize fentanyl.
Gotcha.
They're pretty specific.
What about mass spec, GCMS? Good, bad, indifferent? What do you feel?
To me, GCMS is really, with what is out there now, I mean, in generally speaking, I think GCMS is the only way to go. Because I talked about fentanyl and carfentanyl just as a product. To cut those things up, when you make fentanyl just by itself, and if you're going to put no other drug in with it, you got to do a 100-to-1 cut. And that means for every 1 kilo of fentanyl that you make, you cut it up with 100 kilos of lactose, mannose, or some other inert ingredient. So when you get down to a street level sample, you're looking at a sample that's maybe 1% fentanyl. And the Raman and FTIR technology, they just can't pick it up at that level. It's not the instruments, it's just that technology. And it's going to be overwhelmed with whatever the cut is, and so in most of those cases, you're going to miss that. And the only way to pick that up is with the GCMS technology, where you separate the sample into its individual components with the gas chromatograph, and then identify them as they come off the column. And that's really the only true way to identify what we've got out there with the carfentanyl, the threats we've got out there now, because these drugs are so potent. They're so far cut up by the time it hits the street that you almost need that type of technology to identify accurately what you're looking at.
Interesting.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right, I'm gonna start this next question off by saying that as of right now, we disagree with you. And I would like to, and a lot of the community that we deal with disagrees with you. We would like to hear the other side, the other argument, the other points of view as to why it is done. You mentioned before that you make your entry in a level A. What is your reason? What are your thoughts behind it? What's the driving force behind the level A? Because from a hazmat point of view, this doesn't seem to warrant a level A entry.
Well, when you go entry, often you don't know what it is that you're running into. And so OSHA mandates at minimum you're in level B. And so if you're just wandering into a clan lab, you're probably going to be in level B, unless you have intel telling you that there's fentanyl in there. Now, a couple things that would warrant, in my mind, the level A. One is when you go marching on in there, you got a $4,000 piece of equipment on your back that's got canvas, nooks and crannies, that SCBA. If you get anything on it, there's no way, especially with like a carfentanyl, that you're going to effectively decon that, because someone's going to go hands on that without gloves or some point in time in the future and going to take a dose. And so the risk that you have of your equipment just being exposed, that's one thing. But you're talking about things that a banned chemical weapons agent. Do we go into ricin? Here's another scenario. Do we go into ricin labs? If you were known going into ricin or some type of sarin operation, would you go on anything less than level A? And most people would say no. They'd probably go on level A. Well, you got a banned chemical weapons agent now that's floating around being masked as a narcotic, but realistically, it's a WMD agent. And like I said, and how do you want to protect your people? And that's the bottom line. And I don't think it hurts to go overboard when it comes to what we've got out there now to go level A because of that threat. We've gone beyond fentanyl, and we've got analogs out there that are more potent than fentanyl, including this carfentanyl And we've got documented deaths all over the country now and in Canada. Carfentanyl's floating around, and we don't know what we're going into until you get in there and start doing assessment. Once you get an assessment, you start doing some analysis and identifying what it is you're dealing with, then you can back off and start downgrading. But until then, where we're at right now with what's out there, I think it warrants a level A if you're going into the truly unknown and you think that there's fentanyl or something related to fentanyl. I would warrant going in level A until you've been able to back off and identify what's in there and downgrade.
What about your glove selection? What are you feeling?
Well, most of the level A's come with the gloves on the surface, but you can put some extra internal. It's not going to go through the nitrile gloves. Like I said,
right.
as long as you're not going in there and disturbing anything, I think you have to be careful when you ventilate. Obviously, one of the first things we do is we heavily ventilate one of these areas. But if there's product out, and you're just going to make matters worse. And so it's going to be a judgment call. It's going to be on the individual's training going in, how they want to handle that specific scene. And if you walk in and there's dishes and Pyrex dishes and you got powder sitting out, obviously you don't want to push a lot of air through there. You got to be very careful on how you process and what you're going to look at and what you're going to identify. And the pill mills that we've got, where they just bring the drug in out of China and just put it into a pill or a tablet or a capsule. When you blend those powders and mix them all up, you make a mess. Every pill mill we have, there's powders everywhere. And as a guy walking in, not knowing what's what, I don't know what areas are hot. And so again, that's one of the reasons I'd warrant a level A, because there's just so much gross contamination. It's visible. I don't know what areas are hot. And it could just be binder. It could be that magnesium stearate stuff I talked about, but it could be fentanyl or carfentanil in there, and I don't know.
You just don't know.
And I don't know. And so, again, that's why I said, I think that's why most of the time, like I said, if you have intel going in, I would go in level A with those capabilities first and then downgrade once you've done your assessment.
Okay. Have you had any experience, there seems to be within the past couple of years, a lot of different methods of decon that are out there, and specifically there are companies out there that claim they have chemicals that will neutralize the fentanyls and the opioids within 2 to 5 minutes of contact spraying a solution. Have you had any experience with those? And if you have, what are your experiences?
Yes, I personally have started to do some work with, actually, the companies tout that they will destroy the fentanyl or carfentanil, but there's really only one way to find that out, and that's to test it.
Yeah.
And so I just recently got a laboratory on board that is working with me now that we can start testing some of these compounds. There was a paper put out by some Chinese chemists that found that certain other agents worked, primarily the pull shocks, the things that go into pull shock, it seemed to be effective, but pull shock's pretty harsh. And then again, how it's such a strong oxidizer, is it degrading the pseudodol? Or, there's some other things that you have to consider when you wash it off, how much you concentrate in it, what's going to ground, and, is there any problems with that? And so there's some fallout with using very strong oxidizers like that. And so the primary goal would be to buy or to find an oxidizing, and it seems to be the oxidizers that break it down, an oxidizer that would break it down, but then not be so caustic or acidic or a problem for the environment if it was to go to ground or be a problem, and to find it effectively, quickly broke down the drug. Then one of the other things to consider is if it breaks down the drug, what's it break down to?
Right.
Are those components toxic? And so there's a lot of work that needs to be looked at. And like I said, I've got a laboratory on board, and we're doing some testing and evaluations right now, but I just started that about 2 weeks ago personally.
Okay.
So because those are the questions we're getting hit with, is what works, what breaks it down, what it breaks down to, is any of that stuff toxic? Can we get rid of it? Is it hazardous waste once it gets in the kiddie pool? What do you do with that? And so there's a lot of questions that, that follow up with that. Not only does it break it down, but there's some follow-up questions with that have to be answered too.
So they have potential, but you're not sold yet. They still have to be proven.
They're still in preliminary phases. And like I said, a lot of the companies that have touted it have used it against compounds that aren't fentanyl, but they're similar. But again, to verify that, if you got a mouse trap, it's going to work against a mouse. Well, you need to catch a mouse.
Right.
So
prove it.
Prove it. And so that was my concept behind why I've contracted with the laboratory, and I'm working with some of these companies then to evaluate their product and see if it actually works and help them if they're going to tout it that it does, and it does kill fentanyl and carfentanil. So and it's hard to get carfentanil now too. I mean, it's expensive, but we finally got the laboratory standards in, so we're now getting the drugs in and things, that nicotine, some of the other WMD agents that we want to consider too, getting some of those things in to see how effective some of these decon solutions actually are.
Okay, and last, really a pop question. We all have had plenty of experience with whatever it is that we do in this room, and a lot of times we learn through some of our biggest screw-ups. So what was one of your biggest lessons learned in a screw-up point of view throughout your career? Can be pretty much anything.
Well, to be honest with you, I have about 3 or 4 that were equally bad. In the laboratory, and most chemists that are doing research and trying to explore new methods and things have what are called runaway reactions, and basically where I've had reaction vessels blow and go on me, and where I shut the sash on the hood and back away, and I'm at the mercy of whatever's going to happen. And I've had 3 or 4 of those go. I also do, and I guess it'd be my most recent one about 2 weeks ago, we do these 1-pot methamphetamine cooks. And so did a series of them. Well, you can't have any water in the bottle. And someone handed me a bottle that had water in it. So I put some of the reagents in there, started to shake it up, and the damn thing blew in my hand. It was in my hand when it blew up. Unfortunately, I only had the lid in my hand, so it blew away from me, shot over a couple other people. But yeah, I've had a couple of near misses, but nothing that caused the lab to burn down or anybody to get injured.
Listen,
so
safety never takes a day off.
no, yeah. You can't get complacent with the chemistry. I know that's one thing I've learned through 20 years of playing with chemicals is you can't get complacent with it.
That's great.
And in studying these new things, things go bad on you every now and then as you research these things.
Well, I think it's obvious that we're going to have Brian on again.
Absolutely.
I think at some point,
without a doubt,
we're going to have him on again. But in the interim, if anybody out there has any questions or any thoughts, where can they find you?
I work for a company called NES, and if you have any questions, you need to get a hold of me. Our phone number is area code 916-353-2360, and I can be reached at. I'll give you my email address. It's B as in Bravo, and my last name is E as in Edward, SCAMILLA at nesglobal.net.
All right.
Very nice. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, guys. It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you.
Great time.
Well, that wraps up another episode of the Hazmat Guys.
You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and our YouTube channel at The Hazmat Guys. And take a moment to call our comment hotline at 843-628-1484.
We are always looking forward to your feedback about information or interesting incidents that you are part of. So send us a note at feedback@thehazmatguys.com.
And remember, guys, don't just get on the job. Get into the job.